Hello everybody and welcome back to Sober Stories. Today I am delighted to be speaking with Ceri, Ibizan-based DJ, producer and founder of Find Your Own Records label. Ceri's diverse DJ style was initially crafted during her 9-hour sets for the Notorious Jaded at Corsica Studios, London. Her distinctive sounds running from deep, dark, atmospheric house to abstract, psychotropic techno. Ceri has played at institutions such as Fabric, Pickle Factory and Paradise DC-10 Ibiza. Ceri has gained support for her production from the likes of Jamie Jones, Richie Hawtin, with her label also receiving widespread support across the scene, including industry figures such as Ben UFO, Mr. G and Jack Master with radio play on BBC Radio 1. Without a doubt, a truly rising force in the world of electronic music. Welcome, Ceri. I'm so stoked you're here.
Oh, thank you. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. How are you doing today?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Yeah. Where are you? You're in Ibiza, right?
I'm in Ibiza. I'm near the sea and the forest. I've just moved to the countryside, so it's very different to my previous London life. So just getting adjusted to that, but it's lovely to be in nature and trying to go in the sea at least once a week.
Oh, amazing. And what brought you to make that move to Ibiza?
Well, in the first lockdown, like many people in London, I had all my work cancelled. My housemate went back to Germany because she was German. So I was literally on my own in my house for like 4 months. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do? I'm just going to do yoga, meditation every day just to keep myself in a good place because the world was going crazy and it was just a very intense time, as I'm sure we all felt. Mm-hmm. So during that time, I was doing like 2 hours of yoga meditation every day. I kind of turned it into like a Vipassana and I had my phone off till 4 p.m. every day.
Wow.
And I was just getting like all these intuitions and like insights. And I had like loads of pieces of A4 paper, just all these notes that were just coming, like all these things were just coming to me. And I like did microdosing and I like overcame a lot of psychological issues. And I was like being my own counselor. I was just like, just sorting out my mental and physical health on my own in my house, basically.
Wow.
And one of the intuitions that I got was that I had to move to Ibiza. So I did.
I love that. And how long after having that intuition until you actually made the move?
So I think I had the intuition in like June, July. Came over in August to decide, put the feelers out. And as soon as I stepped off the plane, I just smelt the clean air. And I was like, yeah, I'm doing it.
Yeah, nothing like that.
Yeah, like the end of last year.
Wow, congratulations. So how is it in Ibiza right now?
I mean, we're in lockdown, and we've got a curfew. Mm-hmm. You have to wear masks even in the street. Mm-hmm. So in the cities, it kind of feels a little bit more intense, but where I live in the countryside, it kind of just feels like you're just on a little country holiday kind of thing. So yeah, it's good. I mean, there's a lot of unemployment. There's a lot of people struggling because of what's going on, because obviously it's such a club-heavy tourist industry, and that's, been taken away from so many people. And it's a summer island, so a lot of the people that live here full-time work all summer and then save up and then use that to live in the winter. So obviously a lot of people didn't have that last summer. So, apparently there's just thousands and thousands of families relying on food banks and, but the good thing about Ibiza is it kind of has a community feel. So like I'm in a lot of Facebook groups and I went and helped my friends doing a thing to like pick up all the unwanted produce and donate it to the food banks. And, it's got a bit more of a community feel than it could have in a place like London, purely because there's just too many people there.
Yeah, absolutely. What gift you gave yourself to make that journey over there?
Yeah, I've been coming here every year for almost 15 years, every summer.
Right.
Very different to now.
Very different. Well, let's jump straight into that. Obviously recovery isn't a one-size-fits-all journey and everybody has their different experience of that. And I'm really interested to have heard that you gave up for health reasons. Could you tell me a bit more about what that looked like?
I mean, it's a long story. But like most DJs that I know, we just love a rave. And obviously what comes with that is drink, drugs, late nights, staying up all weekend, which was just normalized, it was just normalized. So I was probably going out raving from like a young teenager I mean, still to this day, if they were open, I would be. But
yeah.
when I was about 25, 26, I think I just started feeling really shit. And I couldn't kind of put my finger on it. I was doing yoga, I was doing meditation. I'd had a very kind of codependent relationship, which I'd removed myself from, and I'd had like counseling to get over that. And I was in quite a good place mentally and physically, but I was still going out quite a lot. I was still drinking a lot. I was still doing a lot of late nights. And I was kind of thinking, well, no wonder you feel shit. You've been a raver for 10 years, you know, you're going to feel shit. So I gave up drinking. I gave up sugar. I started eating even more healthily. And I was doing all the right things, you know, and I think luckily for me, I know my body and I know my mind. So when I'd given up drinking and I'd eaten healthily and I was doing yoga and I was doing meditation, I'd had counseling and I still wasn't feeling better. I was like, okay, there's something else going on here, because there just must be, you know. So I kept going to the doctors because I was getting more and more tired. And at this point, this was when my DJ career first started like taking off. I was going around the world. I was, you know, starting to like get gigs abroad and get gigs in America and Mexico. And I was feeling shit. And I was like, I don't understand this. Like everything I want is happening. And I feel so grateful and I'm so happy for everything that's happening. And at first I was feeling amazing, but then all of a sudden I just started feeling like really shit. And I was so tired. I could hardly get out of bed. I had a part-time job teaching at a music school, and it was a 10-minute walk from my house, and it got to a point where I had to drive or get a taxi because I couldn't even walk for like 10 minutes. And I was like, okay, this is not normal. And I kept through this period of about 2 years, there was this real gradual decline. And it was almost so gradual that you don't really notice it when you're in it. Do you know what I mean? And then you kind of look back and you're like, yeah, this is not normal. And I kept going to the doctors. And at first they were like, oh, you're stressed, you're depressed, oh, it's in your head. And I was like, oh, maybe it is. Maybe I need to do more meditation. Maybe I need to do more counseling. And I was like, hang on a minute. No, like I know my body. I know my mind. This is not in my head. Like this is in my body. Like I know there's something wrong with my body. So I kept going back, kept having more tests. And they were like, your tests have all come back normal. There's nothing wrong with you. It's all in your head. So then I started to doubt myself. I was like, well, maybe it is in my head. Like maybe I'm mental. Like maybe, you know, I was pushing myself. I was pushing against it. I was trying to like do more and more and just forcing myself to do stuff. And then eventually I was like, no, this isn't working. I just need to listen to my body. And I just started allowing myself to sleep. And it got to a point where I was sleeping like 20 hours a day for like 3 months. And it sounds ridiculous, but then I started feeling a bit better. And I was like, okay, well, my body just clearly needs to sleep and heal itself of whatever's going on, you know? And during this time, I kept going back to my GP in Bethnal Green where I was living at the time. And she just kept saying, oh, it's in your head, or you're stressed. And eventually I was like, no, like you need to help me. Like there's something wrong. Like you have to help. And then they diagnosed me with chronic fatigue syndrome. But chronic fatigue syndrome isn't an answer or a diagnosis. It's a symptom. You know, it's like if you're chronically fatigued, there's a reason for that. You can't just say, oh, you've got chronic fatigue syndrome. So I went and saw a rheumatologist. I went to see a virologist. I was getting cold. So I was like covering my face as well by this point, like literally like the size of apples. I had to cancel loads of my work. I was getting into debt because I couldn't work and I needed money to pay my rent. So I was getting credit cards out to pay my rent. And it was just like this downward spiral. And I didn't understand it. It was just like mental. I saw a rheumatologist who basically was like, oh, you know, we're going to give you counseling, we're going to put you on antidepressants, and we're going to give you painkillers. And I was like, I'm not depressed. I don't need antidepressants, and I'm not in pain. I don't need painkillers. There's clearly something wrong with my immune system. I showed him all these pictures of my face, like covered in cold sores. Like, look, there must be something wrong with my immune system. Like, this is not normal. You have to help me. Bearing in mind, I'd been waiting 6 months for this appointment. So then he put me through to a virologist. I had to wait an immunologist, had to wait another 4 months to see the immunologist, who said, oh, just take these antiviral tablets for the rest of your life. And I was like, well, what do they do? I looked them up. They cause problems with your liver. They cause problems with your organs. And I was like, I don't want to take antiviral medication for the rest of my life. I want to find out what's causing these viral attacks and what's causing this fatigue. And luckily at the time, a friend of mine referred me to a naturopath, and I went to see this naturopath like privately. And I also found out about functional medicine. Now, I had never heard of functional medicine until this point. I don't know if you've heard of functional medicine.
Yes, I do. I'm a big fan.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. So at the time, I'd never even heard of it, but now it makes so much sense. And I think it's, it's definitely the future of medicine, and unfortunately, for various reasons, the NHS is underfunded, it's overworked, and that's even before what's gone on recently. Do you know what I mean? And, it's very much symptom-based. Oh, you got a headache? We'll give you a painkiller,
right.
Functional medicine looks at the root cause of medicine. So you got a headache? Why have you got a headache? Yeah. It's so simple and it makes so much sense. But I'd never even heard of this until I got so ill that I literally thought I was dying at this point. I literally thought I was dying. I just couldn't understand it. I was like, the only way I can describe it was like I was living in a vat of honey. So like every thought I had and every movement I made was like a struggle through this thick thing. It got to a point where I couldn't even read a book. Like I used to read novels from the age of 8. Like I love reading, and I couldn't even read more than a paragraph because I couldn't concentrate on a book. And I remember about 2 years after I finally found out what it was and I started gigging again, I remember texting my friend Anna and I was like, I just read a book for like the first time in like 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was, so anyway, like I'm trying to make the long story short, but it's kind of becoming a long story, but I feel it is relevant. So anyway, what I realized after seeing the naturopath and the functional doctor was that I actually had mold poisoning and a parasite.
Wow.
But the NHS had not picked up on this because they're just not trained to deal with this kind of stuff. It's quite a new thing. And it all kind of made sense then, because just as my DJ career started taking off, I got a gig in Mexico. And that coincided with me moving into a new house in Bethnal Green, which was moldy. Now, at the time, I wanted cheap rent. It was next to the tube. I wanted to have a music studio. I was like, okay, it's a bit moldy, but it's cheap. I can have a music studio if I had the cheap room. Perfect. Not realizing how dangerous mold is and how damaging it is to your health. Plus, the gig in Mexico, I had the worst food poisoning I've ever had in my entire life and didn't realize at the time that I'd obviously picked up a parasite. So I think if it had just been one of these things or the other, potentially it wouldn't have affected me so badly. But because it was two, like in the same month, plus also, all the partying's probably taken its toll on my body too. I'm not going to say that didn't have some sort of cause towards this, but it was just like all these different stresses at once. My body just couldn't cope. But I wasn't even aware at the time of what the stresses were until I went private and saw this functional doctor and the naturopath and started realizing that I had mold poisoning and a parasite. I also had a buildup of heavy metals in my body. Like I tested really high for mercury because my body just was so overburdened. It couldn't get rid of all the shit, basically.
Right.
And I think, the world we live in, unfortunately, now is so toxic. The air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat. I did like a webinar thing, like a free webinar with Tony Robbins the other day. And even Tony Robbins, one of the most brilliant minds in the world, he got mercury poisoning a few years ago, apparently. And he was like, oh my God, I feel shit. What's wrong? And he was eating a lot of tuna.
Wow.
Yeah. So I genuinely believe, not to scare anyone, but I believe the next pandemics are going to be parasitic and metals. Because... Yeah. And, but the thing is, knowledge is power. So if we know that and we know how to cleanse our bodies and detox, it's not going to affect us.
Right. So how did you kind of heal? How did you begin your healing from that?
Well, it was a long journey.
Right.
I just did a lot of detoxing. I cleaned up my diet. I take a lot of supplements. I do colonics. I do enemas. I take loads of detoxing things. I do it all naturally. I eat really, really healthily. So, I don't eat gluten. I don't eat dairy. I don't eat wheat. I don't eat sugar. And that was actually my reason for giving up alcohol, was not the alcohol itself. It was the sugar, because alcohol is basically sugar.
Right.
Like, so basically, I'm not going to say I didn't have an alcohol problem. Like, I think most people, especially in the UK, like we're the most binge drinking country in the world. You know what I mean? So I definitely was a binge drinker. I'm not going to say I was an alcoholic. I wasn't like alcohol dependent, but, I could drink like big rugby player men under the table, and I was always the last to leave the after party. And, I drank a lot. Like when I was at uni, me and my friends would drink like a litre of vodka between two before we went out. and then have to get carried home at the end of the night. You know, this was normal, this was normalized. So I'm not going to say I didn't have a problem with alcohol, but it wasn't the problem with alcohol that made me stop drinking. It was the fact that I knew that I needed to clean up my diet if I wanted to feel better.
Extraordinary. And I mean, you're just reminding me of how embedded it is in the culture in the UK, binge drinking, and how normalized. Like, you're like, a bottle of vodka between two before we go out. And I was like, yeah, that's what we do, right? And we are the last to go home.
I would literally die if I did that now.
Yeah. Oh my God. Can you imagine if I have like one too many coffees?
Yeah.
Fantastic. And so how quickly did you notice that you started to feel better?
Well, it was about 3 or 4 months after first seeing my naturopath for the first time. And this was in about 2017, I think.
Okay.
This heavy fog, which I'd had for about 2 to 3 years, this fog had just been this like thick thing. I literally felt like I was drowning in this honey substance. And about 3 months after seeing my naturopath and starting the detoxing supplements and doing these things and like the colonics and everything, it just kind of started to lift off my head a little bit. And then I started feeling really good in end of 2017, and I had a little relapse in 2018. So, you know, the healing journey is not
linear
like that, you know. So, you know, even recently, like in December last year, I just moved to Ibiza. You know, I was feeling really, really good. I was feeling the best I've probably felt in about 8 years. I was just feeling so good. Then in January, I had suspected COVID, and a few stressful things happened. I had to move house, like a few other stressful things happened, and it kind of just knocked me back again. And yeah, it took me another few weeks to kind of bounce back from that. So, you know, I can get to a point where I feel really, really good, but then a stressor might come along, either, you know, an illness or a stressful situation, and it will just kind of affect my body. And so I don't know if you've heard of adrenal fatigue as well. Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of the practitioners that I've been working for don't like the term adrenal fatigue. They prefer the term HPA axis dysregulation, which, I mean, it's the same kind of thing basically. But again, adrenal fatigue is almost a symptom that you need to dig deeper for as well. So obviously all these different stresses were having such an impact on my body that it affected my adrenal glands, which then lowered my tolerance to stress. So stressful things that might not have affected me before really, really affected me. So I still have to make a lot of effort to try and not get stressed, because it can affect my health a lot more than the average person. However, you know, I've got to a stage now where I'm feeling a lot better, but I don't think I would ever drink again.
Wow. What an extraordinary story, and what a brave journey you've taken to well-being for yourself and taking care of yourself.
Yeah, but I think, to be honest, like, it's easier to give up drinking for a reason like that than it is if you have a drinking problem, because you if you literally think you're dying, you will do anything. Like, if someone said to you tomorrow, oh, you know, you've got 6 months to live unless you give up alcohol, you'd give up alcohol.
Well, I think that's really interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of people get to that point and want to give up alcohol because they think they're dying, or they know they're dying, or they've been given some big health scare and can't give up because the hold of addiction can be so tough. So I don't think it's completely linear around like the health scare, but I think what you've done for yourself is clearly, you know, you've taken the opportunity which was presented to you as a big scare, and you chose to use that as an opportunity to live your best life, which is wicked. I just want to talk about your 18-hour sober party stint at the Panorama Bar, where you said you had more fun and felt freer than you ever had being off your face, which I just think is just such a brilliant testimony to people who are thinking like, oh, I get sober and then it gets boring. Like, not at all. What are your coping mechanisms when you go out?
Well, I think firstly it's about mindset. Like, if you believe that you can't go out and have fun without a drink, that's going to be your experience.
Right.
Because you're going to perceive it through that lens of belief. So if you change your belief, you know, and you truly say to yourself, I'm going to go out and I'm going to have an amazing time sober, you will.
And how do you kind of use mindset to change your thinking? Do you have affirmations you use, or?
Yeah, I like to do affirmations. I do a lot of meditation. I think I do Bikram yoga almost every day. That really helps as well. Obviously, I have to do it at home now. It's not quite the same as like sweating it out, but yeah, I really love yoga, meditation. That to me is kind of my coping mechanisms. And I even do that in a club. Like that's one of the things I used to, especially at the beginning, I did find it hard. It was a bit of an adjustment. It took a while for me to kind of really feel comfortable in that environment sober. But what I used to do was, my little trick was, I used to just pretend I was off my face.
Nice.
I would almost trick myself into thinking I was, and I would literally just go in the middle of the dance floor as soon as I got to the club, and I'd just do a meditation. But I would do the meditation while I was dancing with my eyes shut. So I'd be on the dance floor like, and everyone would be like, oh, that girl's a nut, but I would just be doing meditation.
I so relate. I definitely found that was a really helpful tool. And I remember going out with my friends who aren't in recovery early in my recovery, and one of their friends turned to them and went, is she relapsed? She seems really like off her head. And I was like, it was the greatest compliment, because I was just deeply enjoying myself being out,
Amazing. Yeah. And I think, as long as the music's good, you shouldn't need to have anything else to help you through, so
totally fantastic. So lots of people have a huge fear that friendship groups and peers change when we take the decision to get sober. How did this change or not for you?
I mean, it does. I mean, some of my friends have been really, really supportive. And even though they're still doing that, we can still hang out and be friends, and it's great. Other friends were quite mean. But it's just shown me who are my true friends, And if your relationship with that person is purely based on doing Kate and after party together, and you take that out of the equation and you're not friends, then you're not really friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was hard to lose some friendships, but I think, it strengthened the friendships that I do have, and I'm not judging anyone, of course, like everybody can do what's right for them and do what they feel is right for them. But, certain people I've realized now, since that I don't partake in those activities anymore, that I'm actually like, oh, well, we're not as good friends as I thought we were, So, and that's fine, you have to kind of flow with that.
And how did you find the adjustment to finding your new tribe? Was it exciting, or was it something you were like, I've got to find this?
Well, it's quite funny, because I did a season in Ibiza in 2007. And like over the last however many years, a lot of that group have all kind of gone sober and started they maybe at different rates and at different times, but it's almost like it has a knock-on effect. So a lot of my friends that I used to party with are now kind of joining me on this journey. It might not be that they totally give up, but they're kind of cutting down and they're getting a bit more healthy. But then I have other friends that are still like hardcore ravers, and we get on fine. But, like I said, I have had to not lose friends, but you just grow apart from some people, and that's fine, I think, because you need to stick with the people that support you, that you feel good around. So that may change throughout life, not just because of going sober, but through other things. You might have kids, you might change your job, and it's just, I think let that flow, really.
So let's talk a little bit about your journey with intimacy and recovery. What does that look like?
Wow. I had a period of celibacy for like 3 years, which mainly was because I was just so ill. I was like, I'm not really going to be thinking about that kind of stuff. I could hardly even walk or get out of bed. Like, do you know what I mean? I'm not going to be going on dates. And I think when I was younger, I used to drink a lot, and I was a bit more promiscuous probably during those times. But I do think everyone needs to have a slutty phase, get out your system. But for me now, it's, I have to really, really like someone, like emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually. And, it takes a lot more for me to want to be intimate with somebody than it would have done like 5-10 years ago. But I think that's partly maybe just growing up and maturing as well. I'm not really sure. But yeah, I think it makes it harder to get to that place. Also because, I don't have the Dutch courage of being drunk. When you're out and you're drunk, you might give someone your number, have a little snog, So don't really do that as much. But I think then the relationships I have had and the experiences I have had have actually been much better. It might happen less and I might have less, but I think it's quality over quantity. And again, going back to like the drinking thing, it's like, you know, drinking, sex, drugs, social media, TV, whatever. It all goes back to why you're doing it. Where is it coming from? Are you doing it to add joy to your life, or are you doing it to fill a void? You know, and that's something I always ask myself, okay, why am I doing this? Am I doing it to add joy to my life, or am I doing it to fill a void? And if it's filling a void, then I'll be like, okay, no, I need to come back to myself and get to a place where I am adding joy to my life and not filling a void.
Absolutely. I had this really beautiful saying once: give from your excess, not from your core, as a way of defining why I'm craving something, or whether I'm putting out as well, you know, like, do I have it to give? Do I have enough for me?
Yeah.
But sobriety definitely, I don't know if you feel this as well, but it's certainly been a great way of me coming home to my body.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I look back at some things I did when I was younger, I'm like, I could just cringe. I'm like, oh my God. But, you know, I think everyone has moments like that. But yeah, I think now, yeah, you're more in tune with yourself, I think, when you don't drink. And I think especially for me, because I cleaned up my diet as well. Like if I accidentally slip off my diet, I had a friend come to stay a few months ago and I just ate crisps and chocolate like one weekend, and I just felt so bad. I was like, oh my God. So I think the cleaner you are, the clearer that you feel, but then if you fall off of that, the worse you feel almost.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think definitely it makes you more in tune with yourself, your body, your intuition, and not just the not drinking, but also the not eating sugar, the not eating gluten. You know, I think that is going to be the next big trend as well, is that, you know, because gluten is so bad for you, sugar is so bad for you, you know, and as humans, we're not designed to eat that, you know, and I think it really clouds your judgment and clouds your brain, alongside probably you've got a few metals in you, you've probably got a bit of a whatever, do you know what I mean? So like all these things are putting pressure on your bodies, you know, pesticides, all this kind of stuff that wasn't around say 50, 100 years ago is putting extra pressure on our bodies and our minds. So we have to be more careful about what we're putting into our bodies, and also more careful about how we get rid of things and do detoxes and cleanses and things like that, you know.
Excellent. And what advice would you give to others who were sober curious or taking steps towards this journey of recovery?
I think maybe just put a time limit on it, or because what I found was at first when I said I wasn't drinking as much, then people would always try and peer pressure me. Oh, go on, have one, have a shot, whatever. But if you say, oh no, I don't drink, or you say, oh, I'm not drinking for 3 months, people respect that because they're like, oh, okay, you know. But if you're like, oh, I don't really drink anymore, or I'm cutting back a little bit, then people can really try and peer pressure you. So if you literally have like a, you know, I'm not drinking, or I'm not drinking for this month, then people will respect that more, and you will respect it more.
Fantastic. Ceri, it has been such a joy to speak to you today and to learn so much about you. Thank you for sharing your vulnerability. Thank you for being so courageous. And thank you for this journey that you're on and that we get to all, you know, bear witness to, and for your awesome music as well.
Thank you.
Big fan. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you so much.